A young woman is running through a swamp at night, barefoot, following the North Star. She is escaping slavery, and if they catch her, she dies. Somehow, she makes it. She crosses the line into a free state, and she later said that when she looked at her hands to see if she was the same person, the sun came through the trees like gold. And then she does something almost no human being in history has done. She turns around and she goes back 13 times. So what does a future president, a masterless swordsman, and a girl locked in silence and darkness all have in common with that woman in the swamp? Life tried to break every one of them. Theodore Roosevelt lost his wife and his mother in the same house on the same day. Miyamoto Musashi was a masterless outcast with no school and no name, who won 61 duels and never lost. Helen Keller was blind and deaf before she was 2 years old, locked inside her own head. Ulysses Grant was selling firewood on a street corner at 39, written off as a failure. Winston Churchill was blamed for a military disaster and dismissed as finished at 40. And Frida Kahlo had a steel rail driven straight through her body at 18. Life tried to break every one of them, and for a while, it looked like it had succeeded. It hadn't. 7 people life tried to break and couldn't. Stay to the end. Number 7 is the woman in the swamp who won her own freedom and then walked back into slavery again and again to carry other people out. He was born a frail, asthmatic boy who sometimes had to sleep sitting up because lying down meant he couldn't breathe. Doctors expected him to die young. His father told him something he never forgot. You have the mind, but you have not the body. You must make your body. So he did. He built himself deliberately out of a sickly child into a man who could ride and box and last. And then, on Valentine's Day, 1884, life took a swing at him that no built body could absorb. His wife died of kidney failure 2 days after giving birth to their daughter. And in the same house, on the same day, his mother died of typhoid fever. He was 25 years old. In his diary that night, he drew a large X across the page, and beneath it wrote a single line: "The light has gone out of my life." He did not talk about it. He left his newborn daughter with his sister, walked away from politics, and went to the Badlands of the Dakota Territory. There he did nothing for 2 years but ranch and ride and work himself to exhaustion and brutal cold. And slowly, he came back. He returned to public life and became a police commissioner, a soldier, a governor, and finally, the youngest president in American history. Years later, a would-be assassin shot him in the chest just before a speech. He checked that he wasn't coughing blood, decided the bullet hadn't reached his lung, and delivered the 90-minute speech anyway, bleeding, before going to the hospital. The lesson for you: grief will not be reasoned with. Sometimes the only way through is exactly what he did. Go somewhere quiet, work your body until you're tired, and let time do what argument can't. Coming back is allowed to take 2 years. In feudal Japan, your worth came from your lord and your school. Miyamoto Musashi had neither. He was a masterless wanderer, a ronin, dirty, unrefined, mocked by the elegant swordsmen of the great houses. He had no lineage to defend him and no name to open doors. What he had was a willingness to be unbeaten. He fought, by his own account, more than 60 duels, and he never lost one. He arrived late to unsettle his opponents. Before his most famous duel, he is said to have carved a wooden sword from a boat oar on the way to the fight and killed a master swordsman with it. He was, by any measure the world uses, a success. He could have taken a lordship, He could have opened a grand school and grown rich. Instead, in his final years, he walked into a cave called Rigondo, alone, and wrote a book about everything he had learned, about strategy, about calm, about doing nothing that is of no use. He died on the floor of that cave, and the Book of Five Rings has been read by warriors and businessmen for 400 years. The lesson for you: you don't need permission from an institution to become excellent. Musashi had no school, no master, no pedigree, only relentless practice and an unwillingness to lose. What the world withheld from him, he simply built himself. Being an outsider is not a disqualification. Very often, it's the reason you see what the insiders can't. Before she was 2 years old, an illness took Helen Keller's sight and her hearing. Both. Permanently. Imagine it honestly. No language. No way to ask a question, or hear an answer, or see a face. She had feelings, and no way to name them. She would rage and smash things, because rage was the only vocabulary she had. Then a teacher named Anne Sullivan came and refused to give up on her. For weeks, Sullivan spelled words into Helen's palm, letter by letter, and the girl did not understand that the shapes meant anything at all. Until one day, at a water pump, Sullivan ran cold water over one of Helen's hands and spelled W-A-T-E-R into the other, and something in the darkness connected. Helen understood, suddenly and forever, that everything has a name. She learned to read, to write, to speak. She went to college and became the first deaf-blind person in America to earn a bachelor's degree. She wrote books. She traveled the world and spoke for people the world had written off. She once wrote that although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. The lesson for you: your prison may be real. Hers certainly was. She never got her sight or her hearing back. What changed was not the prison. What changed was that someone kept spelling into her hand until she found the one word that let her out. Keep reaching for that word, and be Anne Sullivan for someone else. Ulysses S. Grant failed at almost everything before the age of 40. He failed as a farmer on land he called hardscrabble. He failed at business. At one point, he was selling firewood on the street corners of St. Louis, and then went to work as a clerk in his father's leather goods store, taking orders from his younger brothers. He was 39 years old and considered finished. Then the Civil War came, and the failed farmer turned out to be one of the greatest generals in his country ever produced. He won the war. He became president of the United States. But the story doesn't end there, and this is the part that matters. After his presidency, a business partner swindled him. Grant lost everything again. He was destitute in his 60s, and then doctors told him he had throat cancer and not long to live. He was going to leave his wife with nothing. So Grant sat down on a porch, wrapped in blankets, in constant agony, and wrote his memoirs, racing death, page after page, while the cancer took his voice and then his ability to swallow. He finished the manuscript days before he died. It became one of the greatest memoirs in American literature, and it earned his widow a fortune. The lesson for you: he did the finest work of his life while dying, broke, and in pain, purely so the people he loved would be all right. That is what a man can do when quitting is not available. Your circumstances are almost certainly better than his were on that porch. In 1915, Winston Churchill was the man responsible for a catastrophe. The campaign at Gallipoli, his campaign, cost tens of thousands of lives and failed completely. He was forced out of the Admiralty in disgrace. He didn't argue. He put on a uniform and went to serve in the trenches of the Western Front. Then came what he later called his wilderness years. Through the 1930s, he was out of power, out of favor, and largely out of patience with his own party. He stood up again and again to warn that a man named Hitler was rearming Germany and would have to be faced. They laughed at him. He was the washed-up warmonger, the man who had been wrong about Gallipoli and was surely wrong about this. For nearly a decade, almost nobody listened. In May of 1940, with Europe collapsing and Britain very nearly alone, they made him prime minister. He was 65 years old. The man everyone had written off spent the next 5 years holding a nation together with almost nothing but his voice. Later, speaking to schoolboys, he gave them the whole of his philosophy in one line: never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never. The lesson for you: being right too early looks identical to being wrong. Churchill spent 10 years being dismissed as a crank, and the only thing that separated him from an actual crank was that he was still standing when the moment arrived. Your job in the wilderness is not to be believed, it's to still be there. She was 18 years old, riding home on a wooden bus in Mexico City when a streetcar hit it. A steel handrail entered her body and passed through her. Her spine was broken in 3 places: her pelvis, her collarbone, her ribs, her right leg shattered. She would endure something like 30 surgeries over the course of her life. She would never be free of pain again. She could not have the children she desperately wanted. While she lay immobilized in a plaster cast, her mother had a mirror mounted on the canopy above her bed and a special easel built so she could paint lying down. So the only subject she could reach was herself. She painted what she saw in that mirror: her own broken body, her own grief, her own defiant face, with a directness nobody had dared before. She later said she painted herself because she was so often alone and because she was the subject she knew best. That accident took her body and handed her a voice. Her self-portraits are among the most recognized paintings on earth, and generations of people who feel unseen have looked at them and felt seen. The lesson for you: the world will tell you that suffering must first be healed before you can make anything of value. It isn't true. She never healed. She made the work from inside the pain, and the pain is exactly why it reaches you. You don't have to be whole to begin. She was born into slavery in Maryland, and she never even knew the year. As a girl, an overseer threw a 2-pound iron weight at another enslaved person. It struck her in the head. She nearly died, and for the rest of her life she suffered seizures, crushing headaches, and sudden sleeps she could not control. She would drop into unconsciousness in the middle of a sentence. She escaped in 1849, alone, traveling by night, following the North Star. She crossed into Pennsylvania and was free. That is where almost every human story would end. She had done it. She had the one thing she had been denied her whole life. Nobody on earth would have blamed her for staying safe. She went back. She returned into slave territory, where her face was on wanted posters, where capture meant torture and death, and she led people out. She did it roughly 13 times and brought out around 70 men, women, and children. She carried a pistol, and it is said she pointed it at anyone who lost their nerve and wanted to turn back, because a person who turned around could betray them all. She said later, with enormous pride, that she never ran her train off the track, and she never lost a passenger. She did all of this while suffering seizures that could drop her unconscious in the middle of the woods. During the war, she served as a scout and a spy, and helped lead a raid that freed some 700 people in a single night. The lesson for you, and the reason I saved her for last: Freedom that you keep only for yourself is a small thing. She had every reason to stay safe and every excuse to stop. She went back again and again into the exact place that had broken her. Whatever you survive, someone behind you is still in it. Go back for them. That is what turning your lemons into lemonade actually looks like. 7 people, a boy who couldn't breathe, an outcast with no master, a child locked in silence and darkness, a general selling firewood, a politician everyone called finished, a girl with a shattered spine, and a woman who walked back into slavery to carry other people out. Life tried to break every one of them. It had every advantage, and it did not succeed. That's the whole idea behind this channel. The best revenge is success, not vengeance, but a life so well built that what was done to you stops being the main story. And when life hands you lemons, you already know what the wise have always done with them. Whatever is trying to break you right now, it is not the first time it's tried this on somebody, and it has lost before. Take one more step today, and when you get through it, remember Harriet and go back for somebody. Subscribe to Success Lemonade. New comeback stories every week, and I'll see you in the next one.